Hey folks, I've got some better lighting today, so hopefully that'll make the video quality better. I've also got all my alternator parts all cleaned up and painted and ready to go back together. In fact, I even went one step further and cleaned up the voltage regulator that came out of the same car as this alternator did. It's one of these old school regulators, pretty cool, but I didn't have to clean it up much. The inside was pretty darn. I mean, the inside of this thing looks like it was made yesterday. It's just so neat that um, the outside, didn't fare as well. I had to clean that up and paint it, but I'm also preparing to add it to the alternator again later. So I decided to clean that up and paint it too. But anyway, so let's see. I've got I've got the casing all cleaned up and painted. So yeah, seeing as how this bearing is in good shape, I did not open it up or anything. I just left it as is. If it ever starts making noise or something, I can look into that later. They're not hard to get out, but it's a nice tight friction fit. So I'm going to need some help from a homemade bearing persuasion tool and a hammer. Perfect. Okay. We've got three screws that make sure that the bearing doesn't work its way out. I can't imagine that it would, but that should do. So, all right. So we got our bearing in there. Spins nice. Okay, before we put this on, the shortest top hat spacer goes on over this ring, snap ring here. So that goes on. Then this cover can go on, right? And then you have your medium size top hat spacer. Goes on upside down, sits right there like that. Then you got your cooling fan. Oh, and then I've got paint on the side, so it's a little tight. There we go. Pulley, again with the paint. There we go. And the large top hat spacer goes on. Then we need a lock washer and we need a nut. And there we are. There's the top half done. flip it round. And we put the, let's see, we put the stator on next. Ouch. So this one has, okay, so this guy has two, I don't know what you call them, flanges sticking out. One is just a hole, the other one is a threaded hole. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to assemble it with this connector on top. So that means that this flange here without the threads needs to match up with this guy, so I'm going to orient it, yeah, roughly about there. Okay. And then I've got my armature. No. What is this? Stator. I didn't do much to this guy except I cleaned this outer iron ring up real good and painted it. And then I cleaned off, there was a little bit of rust showing up on this, the top of this metal donut thing, horseshoe thing. And so I went ahead and put a couple layers of paint on top of that just to keep it from rusting any further. The other side of that donut is just about perfect condition, so I didn't even mess with that at all. There's nothing wrong with the original paint on there. So so that's ready to reinstall. Oh, we got to get our spring-loaded little brushes pushed in here. Push that one in. Get it started. Push that one in. Get it started, and then the whole thing kind of slides down like that. So somewhere about there. Okay, now I'm going to set that aside for just a minute and pay a little bit more attention to the back half of the case. Now that there's the two B terminals. These are where your electrical output is going to come from. These are insulated from the rest of the fellow, which is negative, so or neutral ground rather. And so there's a couple little plastic washer insulator things that need to go on, right? So so those go on the back of these B terminal holes. Okay. Now you can set the whole thing. Okay, now we'll bring this back. Told you it wouldn't be for very long. And then this just sits right on here. Just line everything up. The that rear bearing has to fit in that hole there, so it takes a little. There we go. There we go. Getting there. And then we need to line up the holes, the screw holes. So that's pretty good. Okay. So now we have these B terminals here are still needing more insulation. So we've got a couple of top pieces of plastic that go on here. So that one fits there. This one has a little notch out of it. I'm going to put this one on the bottom, facing towards this guy. Oh, you know what? We forgot to put the cowl on. Hey, look at that. Okay, the cowl goes on before these little spacers. That's right. I did this, like, I've done this every time I've done this, so same thing. Got to put that cowl on. Okay, now we put the insulators on. One for that B, one for this B. Okay, so these older cars used to have radios that weren't protected from electromagnetic interference. That's what I've read anyway. And the field created by the alternator would normally interfere with those old radios. So the solution they came up with is to put a capacitor between the negative and the positive to absorb that interference. So this is that capacitor. Modern radios are protected from EM interference, so these are no longer necessary. But you know, it came with the thing, so we'll put it back. Suppose I could have painted this black, but yeah, whatever. Doesn't have to be. So I think it looks pretty good, just the way it is, with the gold and the black and the gold and the black. Yeah. So let's see, 10 millimeter, I think. No, 8 millimeter. 8 millimeter for the little ones. Okay, so these little nuts are 8 millimeter. I thought about replacing these nuts with new ones that aren't kind of rusty, and I thought, yeah, I'll do it later. Or never. So that's why there's a little gap right there for that connector to fit there. And then we got another 8 millimeter nut. Goes on this one. This is a great place to, this screw here that sticks out is a great place to attach negative things because it sticks out so far. In fact, you can grab another nut and just put it right on top of this nut and then put your connector in between them and have a nice ground right there. So very convenient. These don't have to be super tight, I don't think. Okay, one more 8 millimeter up here. And okay, and then we have a 10 millimeter here, and this is where your output connector is going to go. Oh, it might help if I put the nut driver on. So there we go. There's the top, or the back half assembled, and I'm going to carefully grab both front and back of the case. I'm going to flip it over because I haven't put the screws in for the two halves of the case yet, so I'm going to do that. So there's one, and there's one. Come on, you can do it. There we go. Where's my Phillips? There we go. I'm planning on using this for a little DIY human powered generator. So it's going to be an indoor device, and that's why I wanted it all nice and clean, so I wouldn't end up, you know, getting greasy every time I touched it. So there we go, fully assembled alternator. So I think it looks pretty sharp, but that's, you know, that's because I put all the work into it, so of course I like it. So you got your field coil positive, field coil negative, power output, power neutral, so that the electrons have somewhere to complete the circuit. So 4 wires and you're good to go. So along with the alternator, yeah, I went ahead and cleaned up the voltage regulator because I'm going to plan on using this in the same project. I went ahead and took the old cable off and put connector ends on there because I'm going to wire it up slightly different. But this is kind of a neat device. Like modern carburetor or modern alternators are going to have little tiny electronic versions of this, but this is old school electromechanical magnetic stuff. And it even has a resistor here, so the power heading to the field coil isn't, I don't know. Anyway, it goes through a resistor. So I've heard that that's important. I don't remember why. But yeah, got that all painted up. This is the cover that goes on the bottom to keep the dust out. I'll put that on later when I get the wiring figured out. And then I got the cover here, which is all painted up and ready to go. Got the little gasket in there, which is in perfect shape. And I even cleaned up the little screws. What did I do with my Phillips? There it is. So I'm not going to put them on very tight here, but now that the cover is all cleaned up and ready to go, it'll be nice to be protecting those coils and things while I fiddle around with the wiring. So yeah, so I can set it down like that, and I don't have to worry about breaking anything. But anyway, so that's the regulator. Here's the alternator. I hope you found that interesting and not terribly boring. Or if you are having trouble falling asleep, I hope you're now asleep. Whatever it is your goal was, I hope it's met. And I appreciate you watching, and stay tuned for my next crazy random project.